There are so many stigmas about seeking help for your mental health. And I gotta be honest, the field of psychotherapy has contributed to them because we actually stereotype and categorize people. We say things like people from one culture or another, they don't like therapy, or women tend to respond to this kind of therapy, whereas men tend to respond to this kind of therapy. And of course, there's a general public misconception about psychotherapy where we think of psychotherapy as a sign of weakness or brokenness. We think of psychotherapy as like there's something wrong with you and thus you need to get help. What I want to do in my entire career and this week on the podcast is talk about normalizing mental health care. I want to talk about making it normal and acceptable and even desirable to go get help. I want to make sure that people can go get help and not fear judgment or ridicule. I can remember early in my career in the early 2000s, a man came to therapy and he said, "Are you sure my ex-wife won't be able to see this?" And I said, "Yeah, like you're protected by privacy laws where I cannot share this with anyone you don't give me permission to share it with in writing. Like I have to have your permission in writing in order to tell anyone or even acknowledge that you're in therapy." And he said, "Good, because if she knew I were in therapy, she would use it against me in custody hearings for our children." Not necessarily that he was talking about things in therapy that would jeopardize the child. Not necessarily that there was any kind of diagnosis that would make him ill fit to be a good parent, but just the act of being in therapy alone in the early 2000s, this man feared the wife would use in court to try to get custody of their child. Well, things have changed. Well, most things have changed. And I want to talk about that today. So welcome back to the aha moments where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. Of course, I'm your host, Elliott Connie, and there are a couple of misconceptions. Number one, going to therapy does not mean you're broken. Just in the same way that going to the dentist does not mean I have bad teeth. It's part of what we do for the upkeep of our care. Like I go to the dentist every year for the upkeep of my dental care. I go to my doctor's office for the upkeep of my physical body, right? That's what we do. So we should think of psychotherapy in the exact same way. We should be able to go to psychotherapy for the upkeep of our mental game. But I'm going to tell you the secret. I'm going to tell you what I think therapy should be used for. As a psychotherapist, you're probably going to be surprised to hear me say, I don't believe everyone needs a therapist. And I also don't believe the people who need to go to therapy for life. You don't need to have like, this is my therapist and I see that therapist forever. Where therapy should be used most effectively is when we are looking to or deal with change. Like human beings really struggle to deal with a change in our lived experience. For example, getting married. I think therapy is a wonderful thing to do when you are planning to get married or enter into a serious long-term relationship. When you're ending a serious long-term relationship, for example, divorce, you should be able to deal with that. When there are things that go beyond your ability to deal with the stress of how that happens or how something happens. So for example, I'll use the situation I just talked about, going through a custody situation and the fear of not being able to see or raise your children on a daily basis. That fear overwhelms your normal coping strategies and abilities, and you need to go get therapy to help you deal with those things. Things like grief and drug addiction. Like I think all of these things where therapy really can play a major role in helping people to get better. And I'm telling you, like everyone has their threshold. This is why I don't want anybody to think that just because you go to therapy, there's something wrong with you. Everyone has your threshold. We all have it, where it's like the stress of this circumstance, the stress of a certain situation, the stress of a grief and loss issue, maybe drinking or using a drug has gotten out of control. Like there's a thing that has gone beyond my ability to cope on my own. Well, there are people who are specifically trained to help you get back to being the best version of yourself. There are people with specific and unique training to get you back on track, back on task, and becoming the version of yourself that you should have been and otherwise would have been had a difficult circumstance not intervened and caused you harm. Those people are called psychotherapists. They're called psychologists. They're called psychiatrists. Those people exist in the helping profession, and you should utilize them when life gets too difficult. I'm going to tell you, the average lifespan for a woman is about 82 years, for a man about 76 years. That's a really, really long time. And I promise you, something's going to happen to test your coping skills. You're going to be betrayed by someone. You're going to experience a grief and loss issue. You're going to really, really struggle. And that's why we need help. If we can normalize mental health, I think it would be very, very good for our society. We live in a world where we're all reactive, and the traumas we're experiencing are so significant that we're dealing with like violence in real time. We're dealing with things that we otherwise like shouldn't have to deal with. Whenever I see like a mass shooting, and I'll be very, very clear, I am someone who believes that there should be common sense gun laws in America. I don't understand why we don't have them. Actually, I do understand. I'm not ignorant. But I don't understand why we allowed ourselves to get in this situation. So when there are these mass shootings, and particularly at schools, I'm always like, holy cow, like I can't believe we're still here. But the other thing I realize is in our society, people are just like trained to deal with things in isolation. People are trained to deal with like some of the hardest things they can deal with: bullying, some of the things going on online, rejection, embarrassment, shame. We're trained to deal with those things as individuals. I mean, maybe trained is the wrong word, maybe conditioned in our society to deal with these things kind of on our own. And if we could, as a society, normalize seeking help, if we could in our society reward kids for seeking help, I think we would be okay. I think that would do a good thing for us. I remember playing youth football as a kid. This is the kind of thing when I say like we're conditioned to kind of deal with things in isolation and be strong. When I was playing youth football one time as a kid, I was running on the field and this kid blocked me and he hit me right in the chest with his football helmet. And I was probably around 11, 12 years old, somewhere in there, hadn't really hit puberty, certainly wasn't like a young man yet. This kid just hit me right in the chest with his football helmet. And it hurt really, really bad. And I started coughing and blood came out. And it scared the daylights out of me. And I ran up to my coach and I said, "Coach, I'm coughing up blood." And he said, "What?" And then he put out his hand. He said, "Spit in my hand." And I spit in his hand. I didn't really cough up a whole lot. I just spit in his hand and there was no blood. And he said, "You're all right. Get back in there." And I remember realizing like the lesson there was like toughness over everything. And if you think about that, and that's on a football field. Imagine if I said to that guy, "I'm sad, scared, worried, depressed, anxious. I think I need to go see a psychotherapist." You would be met with ridicule instead of support. But imagine if we had a society where people could say, "Hey, the things I'm dealing with today surpass my ability to cope. I don't think I can handle these things." And by the way, all of us will be there. There is no way you're going to get through the entire life cycle and not have at least one thing test you. And I mean really test you. Like not have at least one thing test your ability to deal with life on a daily basis. Like it happens. That is literally what happens. And we are trained to just tough it out and get back in there. But man, if you could develop the ability, if society could develop the ability to just say, like, we're going to support people. If you look like you're stressing and you're struggling and life is too much, we're going to show you where to go to get your legs back underneath you. We're going to show you where to go to become the best version of yourself. We're going to show you where to go to get back to being right and get back to being who you are. And you don't have to do it alone. And it doesn't take forever. I happen to practice a form of psychotherapy that is known to being effective in just a few sessions. It doesn't take forever, but you can do it. But if you try to do it on your own, we tend to do the things that are least effective, or at least the things that are effective, but they bring about negative consequences like drugs and alcohol. It's very easy. If I'm really stressed, I can drink a beer and it calms me down. But it also comes with negative consequences too. So I always wonder, like, can we play a role? Can we do our part to build a society where people can get help? So then as just a general rule of being, we will exist in a kinder and softer space. So much of my work as an author, as a psychotherapist, as a podcaster and content creator is about having open dialogue about mental health and about having conversations about the things that matter in mental health, about being able to talk openly about why our mental health matters and what we experience as a challenge or as challenges to that mental health. I think the only way that we can normalize mental health is to talk about it, and talk about it openly and honestly. Talk about it when it's uncommon, talk about it when it's uncomfortable, and talk about it when it's unpopular. We struggle to have conversations like that, but that's exactly what we need to have. And earlier today, I had a situation on social media that I think is relevant to this topic and why it matters so much. It's sad to me that I think we run from these topics that are so critical and so crucial and so important. And I think we have to run towards them. In order for us to heal, we have to normalize conversations around mental health and what keeps us mentally strong and what keeps us mentally stable and what keeps us to be the very, very best of ourselves. We can't hide the dark parts and the scary parts and the uncomfortable parts. We have to deal with them. We have to address them. As human beings, I think sometimes we fall into this line of thinking that if everybody thinks a certain thing, then that's what you should be thinking too, instead of honoring and realizing you got to focus on your mental health and you got to do the things that are in line with good mental health. I'm going to tell you a story. Earlier this week, or late last week, I should say, I was in Newark, New Jersey with one of the members of my staff, a woman named Helen. And we walked past the Capitol, and there was a statue of a bench, and on the bench was a person. Didn't recognize the person in the statue. There was no plaque. There was nothing describing who the person was. So Helen says, why don't you sit next to the person and take a picture? So we did. And then earlier today, I was scrolling on social media, and I saw a celebrity sitting on that same bench next to that same picture, and reading the caption, I realized, oh, that's George Floyd. The statue was George Floyd. And yesterday, at the time I'm recording this, would have been George Floyd's 52nd birthday. And so I decided to make a post. I put it on my social media. Today or yesterday would have been George Floyd's 52nd birthday, and he deserved to live beyond the day in which his life was taken, and we need to remember this person. That's all I said. That post has gone viral, and the vitriol, the venom in the comments, is wild. And it highlights a mental health disruption of so many people. If you find the need to insult people you've never met before, spread hatred, spread bigotry, try to put people down, try to cause fear, harm, anxiety, that's actually a sign of your mental health issues. That's actually a sign that you are having an active mental health disturbance. Because if most people who are stable, you'll see something you completely disagree with or something that you're not on board with, and you just keep strolling. Or you just unfollow the person where you saw it. The urge and need to spread hate and attack people is an overt acknowledgement that your mental health is experiencing a challenge in that exact moment, in real time. It is a clear acknowledgement that something is awry. It is a clear acknowledgement that something is bothering you. So what do we do about it? We have to become more aware of it. And when you see other people do it, call them out. If people are going to say bigoted, hated things, there are people saying things I can't even repeat on this podcast. Things I don't wish to repeat on this podcast. Names that I'm being called, and that George Floyd is being called, and that other commenters are being called. And if you're that kind of person, that level of hate and anger is absolutely congruent to a mental health disturbance. So what do we do about it? When you find yourself so angry that you're willing to make comments on social media that you wouldn't make in front of your loved ones, that you wouldn't want people at your church or place of employment to see you making, you have to check yourself. Gosh, I've gone too far here. Something's not right about what I'm saying, what I'm doing, and I need to rein it in. And when you see someone else that you know, love, or care about doing it, you've got to check them. And it's uncomfortable, and it's awkward, and it's hard, but it's important. So monitor yourself and your feelings and emotions when you're interacting with other people, including on social media, and when you see other people that you care about doing it, rein them in, because that is the only way that we're going to have healthy mental health. And that is the only way we're going to normalize a conversation about mental health, is to openly talk about it. I was having a conversation with a good friend and colleague. You've heard me talk about him before, Dr. Adam Frower, on this podcast. And we were talking about the way knowledge is consumed in the world we live in today. And there is a phrase, there's a term from the world of psychotherapy, from the world of psychology, You've heard me use this phrase before. You've heard me use this term before. You've heard me talk about it before. And that phrase is confirmation bias, which I think gets in the way of our ability to learn and to grow and to take on new information. So if you don't remember, confirmation bias is when you hear a piece of information that fits with your already held beliefs, you tend to give it more credibility. When you hear information that challenges your already held beliefs, you tend to give it less credibility. Now, why is that important? It's important because when you're on social media or listening to podcasts like this one, I want to ask you, what are you taking from it and how do you apply it in your life? Well, the first thing you have to do is be able to expose yourself to new information. You have to be able to expose yourself to new data and take that new information and take that new data on. And the scary thing is most people are not. Most people's lives are being impacted significantly by this thing that we refer to as confirmation bias. But you've got to be able to hear information that challenges your previously held beliefs and accept it as true and allow yourself to be educated and not be run by your biases. I'm going to talk about that today because I want you to get something from this podcast and to be able to apply it in your regular life. I want you to get something from what you listen to on social media and apply it into your life in a positive way. But I fear a lot of you struggle to do that. So I'm going to talk about exactly how to do that today. There's a clip of Charlie Kirk being interviewed by Bill Maher, I think. Charlie Kirk was criticizing the U.S. government for spending billions of dollars by researching transgender mice. And he was saying what a waste of money that is, the woke agenda, all the things that someone like Charlie Kirk would say. And when you think about it on the surface, that's crazy. That's crazy. One of the reasons that we can tell someone is a transgender human is someone born male that wants to transition or identify as a female. They will take on the personality and the dress and the mannerisms of female. So how would we know if there's a transgender mouse? We wouldn't be able to tell if a male mouse had taken on the personality of a female mouse. We wouldn't know that. So the premise of itself is just so idiotic, but he believed it. And he was talking about this in this interview. And then Bill Maher corrected him and said, the research wasn't on transgender mice. The research was on transgenic mice. And you watch this moment, Charlie Kirk trying to defend that he held this position. Bill Maher explained to him what transgenic mice were and that this research was on those mice. And then Charlie Kirk said, I stand corrected. But did he go on his platform and explain that he was wrong, explain that the premise of researching transgender mice make no sense? No. Because if I hold the belief that the American government has a woke agenda and they're going to spend money, then it's easy for me to misconstrue this thing transgenic to transgender, and then I can feed it to my audience. My audience holds a similar belief, and then they go too. Sometimes you're gonna have a belief. I'm a psychotherapist, so oftentimes people come to me and they have a certain belief about mental health. They have a certain belief about parenting. They have a certain belief about relationships. They have a certain belief about the way that these things should work. And part of my job is to correct them. Part of my job is to say to them that belief is not accurate. Here's the actual truth. And I'm telling you, the people who can take on new information be like, oh, I previously thought X. You've now given me new information. I now think Y. Those are the people that have strong mental health. So I say all of this to encourage you. When you're listening to a podcast like this one, or when you're consuming social media, do so with an open mind and an open heart, because that is the only way you can take on new information. And taking on new information is the only way we can grow and become a better version of ourselves. Someone asked me recently, what would I say to someone that is really struggling with their mental health, but they're in an environment where they can't seek help because everyone around them has stigmatized seeking mental health services. Maybe you're married to someone that doesn't believe in getting help. Maybe you're surrounded by people who would make fun of you or judge you if you sought help. Maybe you're a child. Maybe you're a youth, and you know that your parents would not be on board with you seeking help, and they would start thinking there was something wrong with you. Who knows? It could be any number of things that would cause people to really struggle to get help. So what would you do? Well, I have an answer. The answer might surprise you. The answer might be unusual to you, the answer might catch you off guard. So what would I do? If I found myself in a situation where I really need help, I'm struggling, things are kind of off a bit, I don't know how to be my best self, I'm sad, I'm crying, I'm anxious, I'm nervous, this is exactly what I would do. I would go on social media, let's say Instagram, and I would delete every single page that I follow that triggers me in a negative way, that makes me feel bad about myself, that I compare myself to in a negative way, that I struggle with when I see their content that makes me feel bad or less than, content that makes me feel insecure. I would unfollow all of them. And then I would follow content that inspired me. I would follow pages that when I read what they post, when I watched videos they post, when I looked at images they post, I felt better about myself. And I would use social media as a source of inspiration. Because social media is a double-edged sword. Like, there's information you see on social media all the time that can cause you harm, cause you to criticize, compare yourself, that can cause you to feel badly about yourself. But there's also information that make you feel good about yourself. And there's a video. It was one of the first viral videos that I saw. It was probably 10 years ago. And it showed this homeless man begging for change on the street. And when he got enough change, and it's got this inspirational music playing. And when he got enough change, he went to a gym, and you saw him hand the change to the person at the gym. And then he did a boxing training session. And it was like when you want something bad enough, you find a way to get it. And I remember watching that video and being like, yeah, I'm motivated. Right? And I've seen lots of motivational videos that when I watch that video, I'm like, yeah, I'm ready to try a little harder, do a little more, work harder on my goals. And I would, if my mental health was struggling and I did not have access to any resources or any services that I could get to feel better about myself, that's the very first thing I would do. I would go through social media and I would unfollow every single person or page that made me feel less than or worse about myself. And then I would intentionally follow all the people that make me feel good, all the people that make me feel like a better version of myself. I do that now, actually. I have access to services, and there's lots of people I can call to get support from and all those things, but I do that now, to this very day. I unfollow people that when I see their content, I feel bad about myself. And there are lots of content where I look at it and I'm like, oh man, my body doesn't look like that. I don't have that much money. I don't have a house that nice. I don't have a car that nice. And there are people where it's like, ugh. And then there are other people that I feel inspired when I look at their content. There's other people that I feel uplifted when I look at their content. There are other Instagram pages or Facebook pages, when I see them, it just makes me feel better about myself. Follow those and treat your brain like your stomach. When you feed your brain proper emotional and inspirational nutrition, your brain will respond in a very specific and particular way. The same way your stomach does. If you feed your stomach nothing but junk, your stomach's gonna feel like it's had nothing but junk. When you feed your brain really high value content, it's the same. So what would I do if I didn't have access to resources because of whatever reason? I would be really careful in what I fed my brain using social media. Thanks for being here. If you wouldn't mind doing me a super huge favor, I would love it if you would share this podcast with at least one person in your life that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And also don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or anywhere else you listen to your podcast. And also follow me on all of the social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky. You can search for my name, Elliott Connie, or at Elliott Speaks. That's my handle across all platforms. Can't wait to see you tomorrow.